He stood in the opulent lobby of the Grand Beaumont Hotel, a fortress of mahogany and polished brass that smelled of expensive cigar smoke and old money. Judge Alistair Finch, a man whose life was a meticulously crafted tapestry of legal precedents and social decorum, felt a sudden, inexplicable chill that had nothing to do with the brisk London air seeping in through the revolving doors. He had just concluded a career-defining case, a high-profile corruption trial that had catapulted him to the highest echelons of the British legal system. The verdict, delivered with his trademark impassive gravitas, had sent a powerful man to prison, a man he believed was a textbook example of corporate greed and moral decay. Alistair was here to celebrate, to bask in the glow of his own righteousness, but something was wrong. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran down his spine, a premonition that something he had believed to be rock solid was about to crumble. He glanced at the bronze plaque on the wall, commemorating the hotel's opening in 1922, and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. He had never been here before, yet the space felt hauntingly familiar. He checked into his reserved suite, the Imperial, with a sense of unease. The bellhop, a young man with a slight nervous tremor, led him down a long, carpeted hallway lined with gilt-framed portraits of long-dead dignitaries. Alistair's mind, a finely tuned machine of logical deduction, tried to rationalize the feeling. Perhaps it was the stress of the trial, the late nights, the endless parade of contradictory evidence, but a gut feeling, a primal instinct that had no place in his ordered world, told him it was more than that. The bellhop unlocked the door to the suite, a magnificent space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. "Enjoy your stay, sir," the young man said, his voice barely a whisper. Alistair tipped him generously, and the young man's eyes widened in surprise before he quickly disappeared down the hallway. Alistair closed the door, the heavy click of the lock echoing in the silence. He was alone, but he didn't feel that way. The room, for all its luxurious grandeur, felt like a cage, a gilded prison from which there was no escape. He unpacked his things, his movements precise and methodical, a routine that had always grounded him. He hung his suit jacket in the large wardrobe, its polished surface reflecting his weary face. He had come to the hotel to celebrate his victory, but all he felt was a profound emptiness. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights twinkling in the twilight. The river below looked like a ribbon of black silk, reflecting the lights of the bridges. He thought of the case he had just closed, the man he had sent to prison. He had believed in his guilt with every fiber of his being. The evidence, though circumstantial, had been overwhelming, but now, in the stillness of the suite, a tiny seed of doubt, a stray thought he had been suppressing for weeks, began to take root. What if he was wrong? What if the evidence had been planted? He dismissed the thought as professional paranoia, a common affliction among judges after a difficult trial. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid glinting in the soft light, and took a long, slow sip. The evening passed in a blur of forced relaxation. He took a bath in the enormous marble tub, the scent of lavender and soap filling the air, trying to wash away the feeling of dread. But the feeling persisted, a constant low hum of anxiety. He ordered room service, a lavish meal he barely touched. He tried to read a book, a legal thriller, but the words blurred on the page. His mind was a whirlpool of images from the trial, of faces, of testimonies, of evidence. He saw the face of the defendant, a man named Marcus Thorne, a man who had seemed, despite the damning evidence, oddly calm, almost resigned. Alistair had dismissed it as a desperate act of defiance, the last stand of a condemned man. But now he wondered if it was something else, a knowledge, a secret truth that Alistair had been blind to. He went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. The slightest sound, the creak of the floorboards, the distant wail of a police siren, jolted him awake. He lay there, his eyes wide open in the darkness, waiting for something, for what he didn't know. The next morning, he woke up feeling exhausted. The unease had deepened into a palpable sense of foreboding. He walked down to the hotel's breakfast room, a cavernous space filled with the murmur of polite conversation and the clatter of silverware. He found a small, secluded table in a corner, his back to the wall, a position of subconscious defense. He ordered a simple breakfast, a cup of coffee, and a piece of toast, his appetite gone. As he sipped his coffee, his eyes scanned the room, his gaze settling on a portrait on the wall, an oil painting of the hotel's founder. The nameplate at the bottom read Sir Reginald Thorne. The name was a punch to the gut. Thorne, Marcus Thorne. A coincidence. He dismissed it as an absurd notion, but a small voice in the back of his mind, a voice of pure instinct, told him it was not. He had to know. He finished his coffee and walked to the front desk. The concierge, a man with a perfectly coiffed haircut and a smile as wide as the Thames, greeted him. "Is there anything I can help you with, Judge Finch?" he asked, his voice smooth and respectful. Alistair cleared his throat. "I was just wondering," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "who Sir Reginald Thorne was." "The portrait in the breakfast room." The concierge's smile widened. "Ah, a fascinating story, sir. A true English success story. A man who built this hotel from the ground up with nothing but a dream and a single, unique talent. He was an artist, a sculptor, who sold his first piece to a wealthy patron and used the money to buy this land. But it was not his art that made him his fortune. It was the secrets he kept for the powerful elite who commissioned his work. He was a master of secrets. They say he carved the truth into the very walls of this hotel. It's a local legend." Alistair felt his blood run cold. Secrets carved into the walls. A terrible suspicion was beginning to take shape. He went back to his suite, his mind reeling. He looked at the intricately carved mahogany paneling on the walls, the ornate plasterwork on the ceiling, the detailed carvings on the fireplace mantel. He ran his hand over the smooth, cool surface of the wood. The concierge's words echoed in his head, carved the truth into the very walls. It was preposterous, a local. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a coded message? A last will and testament from a man who knew his time was running out? He had to find out. He started with the fireplace mantel, a masterpiece of intricate carvings. He ran his fingers over the carvings, following the lines and curves, his mind trying to find a pattern, a hidden message. He found nothing. He went to the wardrobe, the largest piece of furniture in the room, and did the same. Nothing. He was starting to feel foolish, like a man chasing a ghost. But the feeling of dread was growing stronger, an icy hand gripping his heart. He went back to the window, the one overlooking the river, and stared out at the city, a concrete jungle of secrets. He saw the hotel's grand entrance, the revolving door, the very spot where he had felt that first chill. He looked down, and that's when he saw it. A small, almost invisible carving on the window frame, right at his eye level. It was a series of tiny, almost imperceptible symbols carved with a fine tool. He recognized them. They were an old legal cipher, a system of shorthand used by barristers in the late 19th century, a system he had studied in a forgotten corner of a legal library in his youth. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The hotel was not just a building, it was a testament, a message in stone and wood. He had to know what it said. He found a notepad and a pen and began to transcribe the symbols, his hands shaking slightly. He worked quickly, his mind a torrent of frantic translations. The symbols were a testament, a confession. They told the story of a man who had been framed, a man who had been the victim of a conspiracy. The man's name was Richard Thorne, Marcus Thorne's grandfather. The man had been a rival of the powerful corporate magnate that Alistair had just sent to prison. The magnate, a man named Sterling, had framed him, planting false evidence and manipulating the legal system. The verdict that Alistair had just delivered was a perversion of justice, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. He looked at the final line of the testament. It was a simple, stark sentence. The truth is not in the verdict. It is in the lie. He looked out the window again, his eyes unseeing, his mind a blank slate. He had built his life, his career, on the foundation of justice, on the unwavering belief in the truth, and now, in a hotel room in London, he had discovered that the very foundation of his life was a lie. The verdict he had delivered was a verdict of injustice, a condemnation of an innocent man. He had just sentenced a good man to a life in prison for a crime he had not committed. He felt a wave of nausea, a profound sense of despair. He had become the very thing he had spent his life fighting against, a tool of injustice, an instrument of deceit. The truth about him was not in his reputation, his position, his title. It was in his blind faith, his arrogance, his hubris. He had been so sure of his own righteousness that he had missed the truth, the subtle, quiet truth that had been waiting for him, carved in stone for a century. The judge, a man who believed in the law, had just broken it. And the most chilling part was that he had done it in the name of justice. He sat down on the bed, his face in his hands, and wept. The judge had frozen, but not from the cold. He had frozen in the face of a truth he had never wanted to know.